million insects or a single creature? When ants unite, the individual vanishes, and the group becomes a being unto itself. Scientists call it a superorganism.
It breathes like an organism. It reproduces like an organism. It behaves much more like, say, a human body.
It's turned some ants into global superpowers. Now, new technology is exploring how millions of tiny minds get so in sync. And state-of-the-art cameras probe deeper than ever into their secret society.
And under my feet right now is a colony of millions of workers collaborating, toiling together.
Revealing how ants turn the many into one giant beast. In the Central American rainforest, a marauding horde of army ants is on the move. When they show up, everything else gets out of the way or gets eaten. For they are a fierce and powerful force that moves and hunts like a single voracious predator. When social behavior is taken to the extreme, it becomes something greater. A superorganism. It's a concept many scientists use when a group of individuals is so hyper-connected that it behaves like one autonomous being.
The concept of the superorganism, instead of thinking of the colony as a bunch of separate organisms, think of it as a single big organism where the individual worker ants are kind of like the cells in our body, and in some cases they're specialized the way our tissues and organs are specialized for particular jobs.
Working together has made ants one of nature's greatest success stories. But how do they achieve this supreme organization? How do so many tiny minds fuse into one?
The most amazing thing about ant behavior is that it even happens at all. Each one of these ants has the potential to be an individual, to go off and do her own thing. Yet they don't. They persist in living in these societies, and figuring out why ants do that rather than going it alone is a very key question in ant science.
Scientists now have a new tool at their fingertips. A remote-controlled macro camera known as FrankenCam meets the ants on their level. When ants get supersized, they reveal behavior that was once almost impossible to see. At the Smithsonian Institute in Washington, D.C., Dr. Ted Schultz curates one of the most extensive ant collections on Earth.
There's probably about 12,000 described species of ants, and we know nothing about the biology of the vast majority of these species.
Biologists don't agree which ants, if any, qualify as a superorganism. But they agree that all ants have one essential quality: they're social. Ants got the communal urge about 130 million years ago, evolving from a familiar non-social insect.
Ants are just stinging wasps like yellow jackets and hornets and other wasps. The special thing that ants have evolved that makes them different from the other wasps, they become social. And what we've got here is a non-social stinging wasp, and then we've got a social ant, the bullet ant.
Bullet ants still look a lot like their wasp relatives. Like almost all ants in a colony, this worker is female. And she's got the basic shape and equipment that all ants have. A body in 3 segments, encased in an exoskeleton. Large and powerful mandibles for defense and heavy lifting. Scent glands that release pheromones. the secret to ant communication. And antennae, lined with nerve cells tuned into both smell and touch. The perfect toolkit for a very communal insect. But bullet ants don't take social life that far. Their colonies are small, and each worker is a self-sufficient hunter. At about 2.5 centimeters long, she can take down prey on her own. Bullet ants succeed in part on the strength of the individual. But a true superorganism needs a much larger population. To achieve that, workers have to be a lot less individualistic. These long-legged ants are tackling that challenge to establish a much larger society and become one of the most common ants in the North American desert. Dr. Alex Wild specializes in cataloging ant species.
These are long-legged ants. They're a really common species in the Sonoran Desert, and as you can tell by their name, they're quite leggy and they're pretty fast. And the thing that these guys do is find stuff that's out there in the desert fast, and they bring it back before anyone else has a shot at it.
An endoscopic camera reveals a complex colony. It's more like an underground village of about 3,000 workers, complete with roads and In the heart of the colony resides the queen. She looks like her minions, but is noticeably larger. It's the first sign of a caste system, where different-looking ants perform different jobs. It makes for a more organized system, but it comes at a cost. Workers have to give up queenly ambition.
With ants, the challenge is getting the workers to abandon their own reproduction in order to help the colony as a whole and to help the queen reproduce.
But the workers don't always obey the rules. Each of them can reproduce if they dare.
That's, from the perspective of the rest of the ants, cheating, and it undermines the cohesiveness of the colony.
This worker is getting ready to lay eggs. But the change in her body creates a telltale odor. Such rebellion must be quelled. Her sister ants hold her down, but they don't harm her. One ant checks her body to gauge her fertility. After as many as 3 days, her ovaries shrink and her captors release her. The crisis is averted, and the workers return to the job of collecting food. Long-legged ants usually forage at night. But as dawn approaches, there's a new problem. A better armed and better organized neighbor is after the same food. A dispute over resources leads to a clash of civilizations. On the desert floor, a mesquite seed sparks a battle between two rivals. On one side, an infantry division of long-legged ants. On the other, the heavy armor, red harvester ants. They're equipped with stingers and the most powerful venom of any insect. As morning wears on, reinforcements pour from the harvester nest. They force the long-legged ants into a full retreat. The secret to the harvester ant victory isn't their weaponry. They have the edge in numbers and organization. The advantage of being just a bit higher on the superorganism scale. They achieve that by making a major sacrifice. Harvester ant workers are all sterile.
Unlike long-legged ants, this colony of red harvester ants is, in my opinion, a superorganism. And I say that because these individual workers do not reproduce. The future of the genes that they carry with them has to flow through the queen because they cannot contribute to the next generation. This lack of ability to reproduce directly ties them in so that they function very much as cells, individual cells of a larger organism.
Instead of their own self-interest, they now devote themselves solely to maintaining the colony, raising their sister workers, and a special brood that hatches just once a year. This is the true next generation, female queens and drones, the only males ever born. The colony reproduces as a whole, like a tree casting pollen to the wind. Wings, a temporary gift from their wasp ancestors, take them far from the birth nest. Some fly to remote parts of the Arizona desert. But others start vibrant colonies right in the middle of town. For harvester ants, business is good. Without reproduction to worry about, the workers can devote more time to work. And these ants divide up the jobs.
It's actually more organized than it might seem. First, there are nest maintenance workers, picking up little pebbles, moving them around. There are patrollers who are generally milling about. There are the foragers.
They don't get orders from the queen. The workers organize the labor force themselves.
We don't think that these ants are able to recognize their individual nestmates. That is, they don't know Frank and Bob and Susie, but they're very good at counting. The ants at the entrance are able to measure the rate at which ants are returning to the nest. And not only that, they're able to smell what job that ant is performing. Foragers smell different from nest maintenance workers, and those smell different from the guards. And so if they measure returning foragers at a particular speed, at a particular pace, they'll know to either go out if there's a lot of food coming in, or if there's not, to stay home.
So it's up to the individual to decide what job to do. But a superorganism doesn't just decide simple tasks. It needs to tackle major issues together as a group, like where to move or how to manage food production. The question continues to baffle and intrigue scientists. How does a group of ants agree on anything? Ants may appear to be playing follow the leader, but in truth, no single ant is calling the shots.
Really, from a day-to-day point of view, it's the workers that are in charge, and things are organized from the bottom up. So it's the workers that know what needs to be done.
What's less clear is how they agree on what to do. Dr. Nigel Franks wants to know how ants make decisions. He's enlisted some tiny lab partners that he calls rock ants. Each one of Nigel's ants has a chip on her shoulder.
Well, the chips are fantastic. I mean, they're absolutely tiny, so we can glue them on the back of an ant that's 2 millimeters long. And what the chips enable us to do is to get each individual ant to identify itself to us.
By identifying individuals, Nigel can tell who collects information, how they communicate it, and how a consensus is reached. At the moment, they're living happily in their nest of cardboard and glass. The test? When that nest is destroyed, how do they decide where to move?
So here is the old nest, which I've destroyed by taking off the top microscope slide. And they're pretty annoyed about that and pretty angry with me. And so they've got nowhere to live currently, and they're going to have to find a new nest site to live in. And we've offered them, at the other end of the arena, a poor quality site over here, and a really beautiful, high quality nest site over there.
The ants begin inspecting their two options. Every time an individual enters or exits the potential nest, a laser beam records its passing. This ant has discovered the good quality nest site. So she returns to the old nest and reports her findings. There's a brush of antennae. Her body emits a pheromone, a chemical signal. Her sister ant receives the message. Come and see.
They do a very special form of recruitment called tandem running. And that's where one ant literally leads just a single other nestmate. And what we've been able to show is that tandem running qualifies as teaching. And what pleases me is that it was the first case that one could demonstrate teaching in any other animal than ourselves. So the ants are incredibly special.
As for the ants that found the less desirable nest, their reports are less enthusiastic. They solicit fewer tandem runners. Dr. Frank suspects that each ant has a basic concept of what makes a good home. So more ants get recruited to the good nest, enough to convince the colony as a whole. Within an hour or so, the entire colony has moved.
And let me put this in very anthropocentric terms, that they'll think, well, it isn't just me who thinks this nest site is good, all of my friends think it's good too. So by using not just their own individual opinions, if you will, but the opinions of lots of their nestmates, they can form very accurate decisions.
This one-on-one recruitment is fine for a small nest, but other ants have developed more sophisticated communication networks to help them build gigantic societies. Central America's army ants are an organized force in constant motion. Dr. Sean O'Donnell studies all the ants in this Costa Rican forest, but army ants are in a league of their own.
This is one of the supreme examples of superorganismic development in insect societies that we know of. They have some of the biggest colonies of any kind of social insect, and everything they do is done with an incredible degree of coordination and communication, and they move with an intensity, you might almost say a ferocity, that's hardly ever matched in the animal kingdom.
With ants flowing like water, getting a clear view is a challenge. The remote-controlled Frankencam is able to follow individuals as they move.
What this does is allow the camera to move through a wide range of motions and float along above the ants, almost as if you're flying right above them. And this gives a skilled cameraman the ability to capture ant behavior in unparalleled, detailed ways.
Up close, it becomes clear that specialized ants are doing specialized things.
Workers of different body sizes and different shapes in an army ant colony differ behaviorally. They perform different jobs for the colony.
These workers belong to distinct castes, like human cells belong to distinct organs. Big soldiers armed with fierce mandibles keep guard, while smaller foragers sweep into the forest. These are the limbs of the superorganism, and they're reaching out for a warm meal.
they're interacting with each other almost constantly. And they do this by following chemical trails laid down by their nestmates and also by maintaining close contact with each other. There's very little time that passes when a single ant doesn't touch a nestmate as they're sweeping through the forest.
A network nearly as intricate as synapses in a human brain, guiding the mass to what it seeks. The group overwhelms much larger insects. Powerful stings inject digestive enzymes that liquefy tissue. The prey simply falls apart into manageable pieces for transport back to the colony. Army ants have no nest, only a mobile mass of bodies. For 2 weeks, it has rested here while the queen lays her eggs. But now, it must move on to hunting grounds. A move that will take an epic feat of organization. Shortly before dusk, the superorganism begins to stir. The huge army ant colony is moving on. The queen only emerges after most have made the journey and left a clear trail for her to follow. Nursery workers convey the delicate cargo of young. In a single night, the colony travels about 90 meters or more. It's like a city full of people suddenly packing up and relocating 80 kilometers away on foot. Scouts have already selected a site for the new camp. They begin to link legs. As ants arrive, they join the chain. The fluid body of the superorganism grows solid, forming a shell around the queen and young. 500,000 cells morph into the skin and skeleton of a single sleeping giant. The army ant colony is one of Earth's great superorganisms. But this forest harbors another ant society, even more complex and far more peaceful. It is a column of leafcutter ants. If army ants are like a single predator, then this is a single giant herbivore. Sister ants by the millions, all born to one queen and all in service of one enormous colony.
This surprising clearing in the understory of the rainforest is the result of the work of leafcutter ants. What we're looking at here is the surface of a huge nest. This is soil that's been excavated up from underground, and it's been done by millions of workers that are toiling away under my feet right now.
Below ground lies an ant city as big as a school bus. A vast network of arteries links hundreds of separate chambers. Each room has a specific purpose. And each ant has a specific job to do. Leafcutters assemble the most specialized workforce of all ants. Scouts are the eyes of the superorganism. They search for desirable foliage and leave a scent trail that marks the way for the mouth.
The mouth of the superorganism is the many tens of thousands of foragers that are out in the field cutting up leaves and bringing them back to the nest. Unlike a single organism, though, where you have one mouth, what you have in a leaf-cutting ant colony are tens of thousands of mouths out there, and they can cover a lot of territory.
Big forager ants clip the leaves into portable sections. As they slice, small quality controllers inspect the leaves for harmful bacteria. First job done, the foragers hoist up their clippings. And convey them below ground into the belly of the beast. The leaves aren't for the ants, they're food for this. A subterranean garden of fungus that grows nowhere else. The leaves nourish the fungus feeds the ants. In one sense, these ants are farmers who perfected agriculture about 50 million years before humans did. But if the colony is viewed as a superorganism, the fungus is just part of the digestive system. It converts the leaves into a form that the cells, the ants, can use.
And every day they're going out and they're taking as much fresh vegetation as an adult cow would take. It is the fungus that's digesting what would otherwise be indigestible food and turning it into ant food for the ants.
Each fungus garden grows to about the size of a head of lettuce and weighs about half a kilogram. A single colony can hold over 100. Where there's a digestive system, there's solid waste to deal with. Tainted by the service they perform, they are condemned to toil in the bowels of the city. Foragers, gardeners, sanitation workers, all these individual ants are part of a single metabolism. This supremely organized society could only be achieved through total cooperation. And they cooperate because they recognize each other as members of the same reproductive organism. Whether it's a complex society of leafcutters or smaller colonies like harvester ants, sisters of the same nest cooperate. Ants from different nests are mortal enemies, even if they're the exact same species. This competition helps keep ant populations in balance. But some ants have managed to overcome this rule, forming peace treaties, merging superorganisms into super colonies with the power, literally, to conquer the globe. This quiet street in Barcelona, Spain, has been occupied by invaders. Tiny, unassuming, and wholly unstoppable. Argentine ants. As the name suggests, they don't belong outside of South America, But now they've taken over to become the most widely distributed ants on Earth. They did it with help from us. From their native homeland, they stowed away in cargo ships to Europe, North America, even Japan and New Zealand. But they couldn't have done it so well and so fast without another trick. Instead of fighting, neighboring colonies joined forces. Biologist Xavier Espadale is trying to figure out why this peace treaty works. He patrols the cities of Spain, picking up ants from colonies kilometers apart. Then he takes them back to his lab to perform what he calls an aggression test.
Now I may see if they fight or not.
When they meet, they identify one another by smell. These two are from colonies many kilometers apart. They should smell different to each other. And that difference should tell them they're enemies. But for some reason, it doesn't.
And those ants, those couple of ants coming from different populations, are not fighting. They meet each other, they touch antennae, they do not fight.
Some scientists believe the lack of aggression comes from a genetic shift that happened after they left Argentina. The change may have caused their identifying sense to become muted.
And they are sending a clear message to me that they belong in the same super colony.
The result is millions of Argentine ant colonies that all act like they're the same. A super colony. It stretches 6,000 kilometers along the Mediterranean coast, and it doesn't end there.
Trillions of ants in that main super colony that is distributed all over the world.
Ants from Japan to California to Europe all belong to the same super colony. But an enemy has appeared. An upstart Argentine super colony. Xavier is smack in the middle of no ants land, between two warring super colonies.
They could be just over the road, members of the other super colony. Now it's a question to look for a trail and try to find if they are nesting here, to do an aggression test.
No one is sure where this new super colony came from. Scientists believe the ants that started it came from a different part of South America than the original invaders. Back at his lab, he repeats the aggression test. These two ants are from nests just across the road from each other, but they smell just a bit different. And that flips the switch from friend to foe. In these battles, there are no winners. In North America, another ant invader might have a better strategy for long-term success. Fire ants. They do more than form an army of allies. They can completely merge into one nest, under one queen, as one gigantic superorganism. Fire ants were introduced from South America to the United States. Once there, they spread like a plague, invading homes and attacking livestock. They have all the advantages of a top superorganism: sterile workers, a system of organized labor, and a network of chemical communication. They also get a lot of help from us. Here in Central Florida is a habitat that's hostile to most creatures. But fire ants excel at colonizing disturbed land. Biologist Walter Schinkel expects that they've already seized this ground.
When we turn the forests of this area into parking lots and lawns and all kinds of open areas, we make the perfect habitat for fire ants. And this site here where we are, will attract colony founding fire ant queens by the thousands.
The infestation starts just like any other ant colony. This fire ant queen has just mated with a male drone. Now she digs a burrow in the soil, lays eggs, and begins to raise a family of workers. But this is where the similarity ends. What happens next is the secret to the fire ant supercolony. Three weeks after mating, the young queen has the makings of a colony. And if she moves fast, she could build an empire. The first generation is a sisterhood of tiny workers called minims. They immediately have to care for the next round of young. But the queen is also desperate for food. Lucky for her, fire ants know how to get it fast. Just about anything will do. When a forager finds a morsel, she runs back to the nest, leaving a trail of pheromones. When she arrives, the mix of pheromones and food odor hits the nest like a starting gun. Dozens of her sisters pour out and race down the trail to grab it before anything else can. But food is not all they're after. They've also found the nest of another fire ant queen, and they walk right in. This isn't war, it's a mass kidnapping. Biologists call it brood raiding. The raiders take the young back to the stronger nest. When the weaker colony realizes it's defeated, the workers defect and help the winning side. Even the vanquished queen follows the scent trails of her children and joins her conquerors. If the weaker nest were allowed to grow, it would eventually compete. A losing situation for all. Instead, the surviving nest just got a lot bigger. In the nest of their captors, the kidnapped eggs hatch, mature into adults, and are welcomed as family.
It's a very confusing and dynamic process that can last for anywhere from days to weeks. I saw one raid that lasted for a whole month and included ultimately 80 nests that I saw.
After many raids, the nest is full of workers and many queens, all laying eggs. The colony grows exponentially. But this is no commune. It's just the calm before the storm.
As soon as the workers are produced and the nest is opened, then the queens begin to compete.
A nest full of fighting queens is bad for growth. For the good of the colony, the workers revolt. They decide which queen will reproduce for them, sometimes even turning against their own mothers. Rejected queens meet an end befitting a deposed monarch, until only one is left. Over time, ants from dozens of colonies aggregate under one queen into the ultimate fire ant superorganism. Using this strategy, fire ants can seize new territory and spread faster than we can stop them. If we have a problem with ants, it's a problem we created. Their societies are hardwired for efficiency and expansion, destined to dominate everywhere they live, from city street to rainforest to desert. It's lucky for us they do.
A study done in eastern North America showed that insects dropped on the forest floor disappeared within 3 minutes, and 100% of them were taken by ants. Almost almost everything out there gets recycled through the ants at some point. They really are hugely important.
The Earth we inherited was an Earth already groomed by ants. We tend to ignore them because they are everywhere. But they're everywhere because they're so successful at doing what they do. Getting millions of minds to think and work and live as one.